Good morning. It's Wednesday morning. It is the middle of the week, and I hope your week is going well. I wanted to meet with you for just a few minutes this morning as we start our days together. Talk about the Church of Corinth. We've been looking at that church in 1 Corinthians, Paul's first letter to the church that was deeply divided. And one of the reasons we learned on Monday was that they were following different people. It wasn't just about Jesus. It was about either some were following Paul, the apostle who brought them the gospel. Some were following Apollos, this great young preacher. Some were following Peter, the disciple that was sent to the Jews. And some were following Jesus. And Paul tries to straighten them out on this. And so he comes to chapter 3, about the middle of the chapter. And he asks a question to kind of clarify things. He says, what is Apollos? He starts with Apollos, not himself, which gives you a hint as to where this is going. What is Apollos? What is Paul? His answer? Servants through whom you believe. Remember, at the beginning of Colossians, he calls himself a prisoner of the Lord. And that's the way Paul thought about himself, the great apostle Paul. You might have thought Paul would answer the question that he asks by saying, well, what is Paul? What is Apollos? Well, first of all, Jesus died for you, so follow him first. And I brought the gospel to you. I started the whole thing, so follow me second. And then follow Apostle. He's a great preacher, sure. Nice guy. Follow Peter because, but he was sent to the Jews, not to the Gentiles. That would have been a predictable answer. He didn't answer it that way. He said, what is Apollos? What is Paul? We're only servants. We're prisoners through whom you believed. And then he goes on a little bit later, and he says, I watered. He uses the illustration of a garden. We can relate to that. I watered, he says, Apollos, I planted, Apollos watered, but God made things grow. That is the right way to think about yourself, the way Paul thought about himself. He had a role. It was an important role. Everybody has a role in the church. Everybody should contribute, whether it's planting or watering or weeding or tilling or gathering. But it is God who makes things grow. Let's never, ever forget that. And that was Paul's message to the church at Corinth. Now, some of you are gardeners, and you're getting to the point now where you're beginning to see the fruit of your labor. My mom just brought us up the first bag of string beans as she begins to harvest her garden. But I think every good gardener would agree with this, that if it were not for the seed, if it were not for the water, if it were not for the sun, you would have nothing. You are just a worker in the garden. That's all you are. You're a worker in the garden. And what you harvest is a result of the seed and of the sun and of the water. You're just a worker. And that's the way we should see ourselves in the church of Jesus. And so that was his message to Corinth. At the very end of this little passage in chapter 3, he says, so then neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. What a great perspective that is to have, and we have to come back to that time and again when we begin to think too much of ourselves and our role and our gifts in the church. Neither he who plants or waters or sings or preaches or anything else. We're nothing, but only God who makes things grow. And when we as individuals and we as a church have that mindset, then we can begin to see ourselves grow because of God, because of his son Jesus. So maybe we're looking at this whole period in our lives where we're apart. Maybe we're looking at this wrong, because some of us see it as an interruption in things, when in fact it might be an opportunity for God to get our attention, to set us straight, to get us back on track, and to remind us that we are nothing We need to get our lives together and our focus upon Jesus, so that when we do come back together again, we will have our focus upon Jesus, and we will begin and continue to grow. And we'll be back together again, Lord willing, this Sunday. By the way, the long-term forecast looks great. We may do it again, or God may do it again and give us great weather to worship in. Remember, this is Wednesday, so Wednesday night, 7 o'clock tonight, we're going to be getting together and talking about Sunday's message. The questions are posted on this Flock Note. I hope you'll be able to be there. We had a great conversation last Wednesday night. So hope to see you then. God bless.